there, Cosmic Warriors, and welcome back to another video. And if you are new here, my name is Hannah. I'm a Western Practical Astrologer. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so today we are going to be talking all about the asteroid Juno in astrology. Yes, we're going to be exploring Juno through all of the signs today. I hope you find this video to be helpful, of course. And if you do find it to be helpful, certainly make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, give the video a like. And if you do want to learn more about astrology, you can always pick up a copy of my astrology cheat sheets available on my website, hannahselsewhere.com. And you can also book a reading with me if you would like to be guided using your birth chart as a tool. Yes, thank you so much. Okay. If you want to learn more about Juno in astrology, especially thinking about her mythology, then make sure to listen to the podcast episode all about Juno over on the Cosmic Check-In podcast. It is episode 50. But what we are going to do is we're going to explore some keynotes, key terms, some information to explain Juno and her function. And I also want to draw your attention to this. So basically, Juno is the daughter of Saturn and Rhea. And you can see here that she had 5 siblings, including Vesta and Ceres. Okay, so these other asteroid goddesses. We have explored Vesta, we have explored Ceres on the channel so far. Of course, just to highlight that Ceres is an asteroid / dwarf planet. And then we also have the other siblings, so the gods being Neptune, Pluto, and Jupiter, right? So Neptune, the dominion of the seas, Pluto, the dominion of the underworld, and then Jupiter, the dominion of the heavens. Wanted to highlight that so you can really see how Juno is connected with these other individuals. But what I do want to mention actually is here's where it gets interesting, but also perhaps highly inappropriate. But Juno and Jupiter were married, okay? So Hera, Zeus, in Greek terms, they were married. And that's the whole thing with the mythology. We explore their marriage, the kind of relationship they had. And then what we want to think about overall with Juno is how Juno is so much about commitment. And I also think this is why it's important to look at Venus in combination with Juno. So Venus naturally is about attraction, beauty, love, what we desire, right? So what our values are, what we desire within relationships, what we might be looking for. But then Juno takes things a step further, and we did explore this in the podcast episode. Yeah, Juno takes things a step further and is more about that deeper bond, more about meaningful bonds, committed relationships. So this is where Juno shows up as how we commit and show unwavering loyalty. Naturally, this can show up in many different ways because we can also explore this through a lens of disloyalty, through a lens of betrayal, infidelity. So whilst Juno points towards fidelity, she can equally point towards infidelity. Plus, any power imbalances that we experience within these kinds of relationships. I mean, in the mythology, Jupiter and Juno, they certainly had their battles. There was certainly a lot of back and forth between them. The power plays, manipulative tactics, a lot of lies, cheating, disloyalty, unfaithfulness, all that stuff. Yes, indeed. So Juno in this regard can also highlight the ways in which we step into that type of power dynamic within our relationships. And this can naturally manifest within our marriage partnerships, right? But this can also be tied to even, I would say, a business partnership, close friends, close relatives. But essentially, yes, Juno does show up as, okay, what is your very behavior like within marriage? What is your loyalty like? What is your faithfulness like? What are your very attitudes towards marriage itself? and unfaithfulness. So that's something to think about, because that can be really different based on your experience. And then to follow on from what I previously mentioned, when we explore Venus in combination with Juno, I equally think it's important to look to Mars in many ways, and the moon naturally, right? Because Mars is about our sex drive, it's about even how we pursue to an extent. Mars is also tied in with what our our passions are, what drives us to kind of go after our desires, especially that sexual element, the sex drive element. I think is important to explore in combination with Juno and Venus. And then with the moon is about our emotional wellness, what we need. There's that supportive quality within our relationships, sensitivity. And then, yes, do you also consider Jupiter, I would say, right? And this does bring me to how in traditional astrology, Jupiter often points towards the husband in a woman's chart. And then we see that Venus can point towards the kind of woman that a man may be really attracted to within a man's chart. But do keep in mind that this is more based on traditional astrology, and things can definitely be very different within your chart. So this is where we want to think about your own experiences. Okay, there are certainly different varieties to think about here. And I'm going to highlight that, well, Juno can be about trust, honesty, loyalty. It's this whole thing of till death do us part. I said tell death there. Sorry for that typo. Anyway, till death do us part, in sickness and in health. These kinds of things within marriage to consider. And I'm also thinking that Juno is really about the sacrifices we make within our relationships. What was also mirrored to you about partnerships when you were growing up? What was reflected to you, and how do you maybe show up within partnerships, possibly based on those subconscious drives? Also something to think about. And naturally, yes, Juno can also be about our very ideal partner, right? What do you really look for within a partner? If you are to commit, if you are to get married, what are those qualities and attributes you seek out? This could be consciously or unconsciously. And then I've also put there that Juno can show up as reproduction. All right. With this brief overview being explained, I apologize about my typo, people. I'm kicking myself for it. Till death. Anyway, we're now going to explore Juno through the signs. And I want to say thank you so much for watching. Okay, so first up, we have Juno in Aries. Yes, Juno in Aries. Let's talk about you. When forming meaningful relationships, right, where there is commitment, there's devotion, sacrifices are made, it's really about unwavering loyalty. What you need is you need your freedom. You need your independence to remain intact. So you can't feel smothered. You can't feel like you can't go after your own goals, for example. It's like you need your personal autonomy to be respected at the same time. And so, therefore, things like possessiveness and even envy, no, these things are not going to sit with you. They're not going to fly with you. Even though, sure, there can be times when you can present as a bit territorial. Not necessarily in a super negative or bad way. It's just that, for example, if you notice someone trying to interfere within let's go with a marriage, right? Let's look to Juno as this marriage asteroid that she is. So if someone's trying to interfere within your marriage or within a committed relationship of yours, you think no, right? You're actually going to be willing to face that person straight in the face, straight in the eye, and say, who do you think you are, right? It's this type of attitude. And any suspicious attitudes from your partner as well. So if your partner kind of presents as being a little suspicious of you and your actions, well, this can make you feel quite angry and frustrated and pretty hurt as well. Because in your view, you might think to yourself, no, like I'm a real one. I'm honest, I'm truthful, I'll say it to you straight. When it comes to this marriage dynamic, you say, I'm going to tell it to you straight. And you prefer that directness, you prefer that honesty back at you from your spouse, from a close friend, for example, from a business partner. And you might actually jump into a committed relationship pretty quickly. This does depend on your chart, of course. But then, even with this in mind, if you do jump into a committed relationship really, really quickly, this could be where it's beneficial for you to learn how to also be cautious, right? To be somewhat cautious, to try and think things through. If there is any type of betrayal present, you just might retaliate very quickly. So if there is any dishonesty, if there is any unfaithfulness, you're going to be very quick to act. And then equally, if things are not reciprocal, your temper can present itself. So if you feel like there is any power imbalance present, there's a lack of this compromise or this seeing that you have maybe your own priorities at times, then this can be where, yeah, you can become heated, you can become angry. And then I'm also thinking that you might not be the first one either to compromise. That's a possibility with this placement, unless, of course, it's on your terms. However, with that being said, I equally think that you can be an honorable partner. And so, in this regard, if there is any dishonesty or betrayal, then you think to yourself, how, whenever I've been honorable. And then I'm also thinking that ideally, so if we think about your ideal partner, your ideal spouse, you might be seeking this marriage partner who isn't afraid to stand on their own 2 feet either. So it's almost like the kind of marriage or committed bond that's going to suit you the best is one where you feel like you have your personal autonomy and it's respected, but then you're equally going to respect the personal autonomy of your partner. Now, this is also where things get quite complex because we want to be mindful of aspects to Juno, right? And then if we were to also consider how Juno can show up as what was maybe mirrored to us through our own relationships growing up, maybe for example, there was this challenge to do with compromising within relationships. Maybe you kind of witnessed your own parents or certain relationships where it felt a bit one-sided, and that was maybe where you learned through those relationships that it's about being quite selfish. However, this is not to say that this is a bad or super negative thing, right? Because in actuality, what I'm thinking is whenever you really do think to yourself, I've given this relationship my all, I've tried to show up in the best way I can. So when you come to this point of it's not working, right? It's not working. We need to break this bond. We need to separate. We need to divorce. We need to break up, whatever it is. Then that's when I think this kind of own autonomy, selfishness quality can support you in many respects. But then equally, there can be a side to this energy that says that there can be a challenge to do with listening whenever there is a situation that arises within your partnerships. And maybe it does push against your independence slightly. And then it's a question of, are you willing to come to maybe a compromise, or are you willing to make a sacrifice? Are you ready to maybe do something to make sure that the relationship stays intact? It's really dependent on your own personal experience with Juno and Aries, of course, but these are the kinds of things that we want to consider. Thank you so much, Juno and Aries folks. And now we are going to explore Juno in Taurus. Okay, Juno in Taurus, let's talk about you. When it comes to forming meaningful relationships, so when we think about commitment, close bonds, we think about devotion, trustworthiness, loyalty, you need things to be stable. You need things to be reliable, secure, consistent. Okay, consistency is key here. So if there are any inconsistencies within potential partners' actions, you just might pick up on those actions very, very quickly and then question them and then think about the very validity of the relationship itself. Oh, yeah, this is an interesting combination because Juno does represent this unwavering loyalty, as previously mentioned, and Taurus is this archetype that is all about unwavering loyalty. Yeah. You value even the security that comes with marriage, for example. So, if you are married with this placement, you do tend to value the very security that is brought forward, right? That you feel, that you experience within the marriage. And I'm also thinking that you can be quite slow to commit as well, right? You're going to be much more slow into a committed relationship. I'm thinking maybe you're willing to move slowly because you think to yourself, you want to make the right decision. You want to make sure that you make the right choice, especially when it comes to something like marriage. I mean, maybe you know more than most that there can be repercussions, financial repercussions that can occur if there is that divorce, right? There's naturally a lot of nuance to that. Of course, I do understand. But then also, what comes to mind here is anything that threatens your security can make you feel fearful, can make you feel angry. Ooh, I imagine this as if anyone tries to interfere within your marriage, then let's just put it this way: the bullhorns come out. You're not for moving. Mm-mm-mm. Like I said, yes, you do prefer consistency, and then you also prefer routine. Maybe you love the routine of marriage and commitment and devotion. But remember, this can also apply to that of close friendships, okay? Those close bonds within friendships. This can also be tied to business partnerships. And so, in a similar way, this is about routine and consistency. Now, if betrayed, for instance, you just might retaliate slowly. If there is any whiff of betrayal or infidelity, you might practically plan out your next move because you're going to be concerned with your security, remember? And if things are not reciprocal, you can also be stubborn, right? You can dig your heels in and say, no, I know my worth. I know I'm worth more than that. I am not going to accept this behavior. I'm not going to accept this action, this attitude from you. And you might take your time as well when it comes to compromising to an extent. Maybe for you, it really needs to sink in. Maybe a certain change, for example, is to happen within a committed relationship of yours. And so it could require some type of compromise on your part. It could require a sacrifice, possibly on your part, your partner's part. But then you're going to plan things out, think it through more. But hey, overall, you can be very loyal, committed as a partner. And then ideally, you are seeking a marriage partner who is secure, who is financially supportive. Not necessarily to say that you need to live this super lavish lifestyle and it's really wealthy and rich or whatever. It's more so about being able to provide. It's knowing that you and your spouse, you and your partner, you have enough. And then at the same time, I'm thinking that when we consider what was mirrored to you through your own parents or through relationships growing up, maybe it was the financial quality, the financial aspect that was so important. That was reflected back at you a lot, that this is what you need to prioritize. It is your stability. On that note, this is where aspects are so important to explore because, I mean, depending on your aspects, there could be some things in the chart that indicate that you might even stay in a marriage because of that financial support, because of the security, even though you think to yourself, I'm actually really stagnating here. I'm not growing here. I'm bored here. We don't align anymore. We don't have sex anymore, right? There could be these types of experiences within the marriage itself. Could even involve, of course, a close relationship with a friend where maybe you think our priorities are not the same, our routines are not the same, our lifestyles are not the same, and yet here I'm staying, here I'm sticking at this, and I'm trying to make this work, and I'm actually really unhappy and I'm really unfulfilled. Yeah, look to your chart, see what aspects are being made to Juno. Thank you so much, Juno and Taurus folks. Now we're going to explore Juno in Gemini. Okay, Juno in Gemini, let's talk about you. When forming meaningful relationships, so if we think about commitment, devotion, we think about marriage here, showcasing great loyalty, you need mental and verbal stimulation. So, regular interactions can keep you engaged, but also, this is about communication being such an important aspect of your relationships. This is about keeping each other posted, for example. This is about connecting through words. And becoming bored is the last thing you want. The last thing you want. Therefore, being able to spice things up a bit is essential. And anything controlling, anything that's super dominating, too serious, too rigid, too narrow, will make you want to run for the hills. You're like, where is the exit? Because I can't be dealing with that. Because I think for you, one, you prefer movement, you prefer growth and change and exploration. You also prefer moments of lightheartedness. Hey, this is not to say that you can't be serious. Gemini is a multifaceted sign. Gemini can be serious, right? There are many sides to this archetype. But if it gets to a point where it's too burdensome, it's too much pressure, it's too serious, it's too suffocating, this is really where you're not going to feel fulfilled. Plus, I am thinking to myself that when it comes to commitment itself, you might prefer to keep your options open a little bit, especially at the beginning. Maybe you're not very quick to commit, at least not initially. Maybe for you, it is about asking yourself, okay, who do I want to partner up with or who do I align with? Hey, you might even prefer to commit to a couple of people at once or to just interact with a few different potential partners at once. Okay, I get that there are different types of how we show up within relationships, especially with today, okay? More modern. Still, I will also say this, when it comes to actually being in a committed relationship or within a marriage, and you notice that there is any information that doesn't really add up, right? You can be quite quick-witted, you can be quite sharp, quite bright. So if you notice any of that, then you might piece the facts together. And that this within itself makes me think about, if you are betrayed, you will retaliate by being detached. By being detached. And if things are not reciprocal, you can feel really irritated. You can even feel quite nervous. Maybe there can be a lot of tension that's held in the body, and you think, I don't know where to direct this. And you just want to speak, you just want to say the thing, right? And you might be very vocal about anything that feels off, any information that isn't pieced together correctly, any facts that are overlooked. And at the same time, sure, you can be quite open to compromising. You can be, but I guess also you can be quite persuasive, quite persuasive with your partner too. So that is a possibility. And then equally, what comes to mind here is what might have been mirrored back at you through relationships growing up. So we think about even your parents or other relationships within the environment. You might have picked up on how it's important for there to be effective communication, right? For there to be this way of maybe having playful banter, laughter, right? There is that playfulness with Gemini. And I'm also thinking that ideally, you are seeking a marriage partner who is clever, who's quite witty, just enjoyable to be around, maybe feeling like your partner is your friend. They're also your friend. There's someone that you can confide in often and just chat away to. And then equally, maybe it's you listening to them. Hey, it could even be a case of you not being super chatty and you are the listener and you're okay with that. But then this is also where aspects come in, right? We want to consider aspects to Juno, so certain challenging aspects to Juno could very well highlight miscommunication, misunderstandings, trickery, lies, deception, things like that. Or just feeling like you do not have a voice, you do not have a say within your committed relationships. Thank you so much, Juno in Gemini, folks. And now we're going to talk about Juno in Cancer. Okay, so Juno in Cancer, folks, when forming meaningful relationships, meaningful bonds where there's commitment, there's devotion, loyalty present, what you need is to feel nurtured. You need to feel safe. You need to feel close. You possess a strong desire for an emotional bond, right? So this is about feeling that emotional connection, that emotional depth. Sure, we could argue here that there is this possessiveness present, or there could be this tenacity, this determination, this never letting go quality. And it is also necessary that you are supported and that you have your emotional needs met. You prefer this warmth, this comfort. You can be very sensitive to the emotions and feelings of your spouse, of your partner. You can also be very sensitive to the emotions and feelings of close friends, close relatives. And I am thinking that when it comes to commitment itself, that is certainly something that depends on how you feel. Really, how you feel in terms of that emotional connection. And you may even find that, you could be someone who decides to commit early on because of that emotional bond. It depends on when that forms, I think. It really depends on the emotional connection itself and the familiarity and the safety present. And let me also say this: if anybody tries to interfere within your marriage, within your relationship, this is where you can be very much this protector, right? It's like, you will not interfere with my marriage. I will protect it. at all costs. No one is going to get in the way of me and my family. Yeah. I even see this as you not liking it, strongly disliking it actually, whenever others try to get in the way of your family dynamics, of the marriage itself, the relationship itself. And if betrayed, right? So if there is betrayal, if there is infidelity that comes into the equation, you may very well retaliate by withdrawing, by being moody. And if things are not reciprocal, you might sulk. You could very well act a little bit manipulative until you get your needs met, possibly. Or you know what? You might lash out. You might lash out and be like, no, I am not doing this. So you can become emotional, but emotional in this determined way, this leadership like way. And you might also compromise when you feel the need to, or when you want to support your partner. Really, what's a big keyword here within your committed bonds? It's support. Plus, I'm thinking that what could have been mirrored back at you through relationships growing up. So we think about possibly the relationship between your parents or relationships in general, right? It was those themes to do with how people can pull on each other's emotions, on their heartstrings. People can kind of get into, okay, well, I know what this person likes or what they need, and so I'm going to play into that. Now, this can also depend on aspects and things, because I'm thinking with more challenging aspects to Juno, maybe there is something about how you learned subconsciously that in order to show up within committed relationships, to get your needs met, it is about trying to really mirror back to the other person what their needs are, or it's trying to maybe use your emotional intelligence to get what you want. But then, hey, it could also be suggested, if we look at this a different way, it was that of feeling safe, right? That could have been the message. We need to feel safe. We need to even respect one another's emotions and care for one another's emotions, but not just emotionally, to support one another physically. Okay, to be this supportive, caring figure. And then you, in this regard, you can be a protective partner. And ideally, you are seeking a marriage partner who is quite soft, cuddly, but they can also be tenacious, they can be shrewd. Maybe there's something about marriage, commitment that makes you so resilient. So, even for instance, if it is that you experience some kind of divorce, a separation, a significant breakup throughout your life, and you have this placement, there is a resilience here. And then you learn from the previous relationship, and then that even assists you with your own emotional needs moving forward. Thank you so much, Juno and Cancer folks. And now we are going to talk about Juno in Leo. Okay, Juno in Leo, let's talk about you. When it comes to forming meaningful relationships, so we think about the likes of commitment, devotion, loyalty, you need admiration. You need plenty of love. You need to feel like there is respect, right? You being respected, feeling seen. These things are important. There needs to be this feeling of dignity, being proud even of your partner and what you've achieved together, what you've accomplished together, celebrating one another, celebrating your wins together. And then doing things that are enjoyable and pleasurable with your partner certainly make you feel good. This could be where pleasure and the romantic side of things are at the top of your list. Sure, it does depend on aspects here. We want to be mindful of aspects. But I do think that you like to You like to play with your partner. You like to remember pleasure, remember moments of joy, okay? Joy within your relationship. You prefer aliveness and energy, maybe passion. So I imagine this as any time whenever the spark feels a bit dimmer. That happens in our relationships. You might seek a way to reignite that flame, reignite that spark, and maybe to keep it burning in many respects. And then what also comes to mind here is when it comes to commitment itself, hey, you might be the one who takes the lead. You might be the one who says, yeah, I'm willing to commit. But then also, if you're being pursued and there's that commitment piece that comes in, you have to really think about, well, how are you going to commit? What are you bringing to the table, huh? Right? How are you going to impress me? I'm the prize. Do you not see? And if others try to interfere within your marriage, so if you do get married, if you enter into a committed relationship, you're faithful to one another, there is loyalty present, you just might let out a mighty roar. Okay, not necessarily literally outwardly. Okay, not literally outwardly, but there is something about being protective. There's something about showcasing dignity, knowing your worth, and possibly, right, knowing that you can walk away at any moment if there is a betrayal or if you discover anything that's a bit shady, a bit odd. But basically, yeah, you're not going to put up with it if others try to interfere within your committed relationships. I even imagine this as if someone tries to put down a close friend of yours, they better watch out. And I'm thinking that if betrayed, sure, there could be a part of this, a side to you that retaliates loudly. It can be loud. Any blows to your ego essentially will not be tolerated, but more than that, blows to the heart, heartache. And if things are not reciprocal, maybe you can be quite demanding. You can be quite quick to go, hold on a second. Can you not see everything that I've brought, that I've done, and you're not trying to meet me halfway here? And you might also be more willing to compromise when you feel appreciated. Appreciation certainly goes a long way in the view of Leo. And you can also be noble, a very noble, very generous partner. Maybe in some way, shape, or form, what was mirrored back at you through relationships growing up. So, this could have been through your parents or through other kinds of relationships. What was mirrored back at you was that of nobility. It was that of holding your head high, okay? Not letting the gossipers interfere, not letting the haters win. We hold our head high. And even if there is a separation, a divorce, if there's a breakup, we still hold our head high. And we remember that we are the prize. Does also depend on aspects to Juno, of course, right? We do want to remember that because, I mean, aspects, especially these challenging aspects to Juno, there could be something that's a bit deeper here, something maybe about the inner child and not feeling seen or not feeling worthy, or there could be this desperation or this kind of yearning to be noticed, even though you know deep down that that relationship has run its course, it's not for you. Though ideally, you seek a marriage partner who is strong and who is really confident in themselves. And hey, they're able to celebrate you too. Okay. They celebrate your wins and they can see and recognize your own confidence and they want to lift you up. Thank you so much, Juno and Leo folks. Now we're going to explore Juno in Virgo. Okay, Juno in Virgo, folks, let's talk about you. When forming meaningful relationships, so when we really think about commitment, devotion, loyalty here, you need some type of order, routine, improvements to be made when necessary, adjustments to be made when they're needed. I imagine this as you preferring spouses, partners, friends, even who can look within themselves and explore their own imperfections, and they can have an honest review of themselves. And you are also equally willing to improve, and you want to resolve any issues that arise. I do see this as you being a major problem solver. So if there is a challenge within your bond, within your relationship, maybe you do think, okay, let's analyze this, let's pick it apart, and let's see what we can do to fix this, to sort it out. You may prefer reliability. And like I said, fixing things, being able to know that there is a solution for any problems that arise. And what I'm also thinking from this is when it comes to commitment, you are going to be very specific. I don't see this as you jumping head first into a marriage, into a contract, an agreement, even into some kind of business partnership. You know, when it comes to those things, anything that is binding, right? Juno is a very, well, Juno does represent things that are more binding within relationships. When it comes to that, you just might take a, let me analyze this and make sure that I'm making the right decision. So there's this thought process that occurs. And then also, if anybody tries to get in the way of your marriage, of maybe a bond, a partnership, then, well, maybe you're not going to be super loud or aggressive towards whoever it is, but you're still going to make sure that your message is clear. And so, for example, this could be about writing some kind of important document, an email, and it's very detailed, it's very specific. This could look like, for example, you being very clear and precise in your wording and your delivery towards someone, and just letting them know what is what, but you're going to be quite calm and cool and collected as you do that. Now, with that being said, if betrayed, right, if betrayal comes in, if infidelity comes into the equation, you just might retaliate by being very cold, distant, critical. It's almost like you can go into your head and maybe you're trying to analyze, okay, what should I do next? You're trying to process the information that's being delivered to you. You also don't take criticism well either. No. You can be quite sensitive to criticism. Maybe for you, what's really necessary is constructive criticism. Anything that's super just critical and there's no like effectiveness to it. There's no help with it. There's nothing to learn from it. It's just like you're this and that's it, right? Anything like that you might think is really dumb and pointless and just rude, really rude. And if things are not reciprocal, you can be fault finding yourself, right? You can be fault finding, you can be harsh with your words. This could be where you then start to criticize, right? You might jump in with what your thoughts are, what the improvements need to be. And you just might be willing to compromise if it means having a well refined relationship. But again, this is a process. You need to take your time as you look into things. Now, you might have also witnessed your own parents, or you might have seen other relationships within your early environment So this stuff reflecting back at you, qualities of maybe being fault finding, or maybe having to be uh, quite selective and particular about decisions to be made within those marriages, within those relationships. Maybe it was a case of you seeing certain relationships really get into the nooks and crannies of things, right? Getting into the dilemmas, the things that are not working within the system, so to speak. Of course, do look at your chart, think about aspects to Juno. Okay, we want to be mindful of aspects being made to Juno. But what I will say is that ideally, you are seeking a marriage partner who is hygienic, who is quite service orientated, someone who can even look after themselves. I'm thinking to myself, if you find yourself in a relationship and that person doesn't even know how to do their own dishes or fold their own washing or do basic things, that could be a major no for you. That could be a major decider for you when it comes to commitment. But yeah, you can overall be a highly analytical partner. Thank you so much, Juno and Virgo folks. And now we are going to talk about Juno in Libra. Okay, Juno in Libra folks, let's talk about you. When forming meaningful relationships, so when we really consider commitment, devotion, unwavering loyalty, you need feedback and for things to be fair. You value your partner's input, but you also want yours to be considered. Okay, there's something about this mutual respect, this receptivity within the relationship, the partnership, and companionship is important to you. You prefer cooperation and harmony. And so, in this way, times whenever there isn't harmony, you'll feel that. You'll feel that strongly. But then I can also see how really this is about justice, fairness. I'm thinking that you can even use great diplomatic skills, negotiable skills to really get your point across. Maybe you can be somewhat tactful, but there is this, I suppose, an awareness related to the give and take, the receiving, the giving. Maybe you can also, in a way, notice whenever anything is off balance, and you can feel that within your body. Maybe you can also notice when things are not so balanced and aligned within yourself. For example, the head versus the heart. And when we consider commitment itself, maybe this is where okay, sure, you might experience more of this passive way when it comes to commitment. But to me, it's about you weighing out your options, you taking your time to really see, for example, are we aligned? I don't see this as you jumping into a marriage just because. I see this as you taking your time and even getting to know your partner, your significant other. This can also, of course, show up within a business setting, partnership setting in this way, even a friendship setting. So if you notice, for example, during the process of maybe getting to know a new friend, and you can assess, oh, we're not really aligned in this way, you then might take information from that and then weigh out, okay, will this work? Will this not work? Using your skills with Libra. And if anybody tries to interfere with your relationships, your partnerships, I think this is when you can really put your foot down And sure, you may not be outwardly aggressive, but you're still going to move things in a way that clearly state your argument, your side of the equation. Oh, yeah, remember, Libra is still a cardinal sign. And even though, oh, by the way, cardinal meaning they can be leaders, but even though you can experience times when you want to keep that equilibrium, you want to keep the harmony, you still reach a breaking point. You still can assess, oh, things are going way too to one side. No, 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 no. Right. If betrayed, or if there is maybe infidelity that comes into the equation, you just might retaliate by being uncooperative, disagreeable, possibly passive aggressive, making it quite clear that you're not pleased. And if things are not reciprocal, again, this is where you might weigh things out. You might start to weigh out, okay, what is going on here? Where is the give and take here? Is there actual harmony within our relationship? Is there too much giving? Is there too much taking? And you might also weigh things out when it comes to compromising itself. Plus, I do see this as you being quite a romantic partner, probably quite idealistic. That's the thing about Libra too. You can be quite idealistic. And so with Juno, you could be idealistic about marriage, idealistic about partnerships, commitment, devotion. And there's also this suggestion of what was mirrored back at you from your parents, from other relationships growing up, is that we need to keep the peace. Keep the peace, keep the peace, make sure that everything's harmonious. And maybe there were qualities of not speaking up, not actually saying whenever you should be dissatisfied, or not saying whenever you are dissatisfied, rather. Okay. So instead hiding that. And this is where I think the aspects come into the equation. So aspects to Juno. So sure, there could be this messaging of, okay, let's agree, even though I don't agree, it's this kind of thing. But it can equally also be about you seeing that it is about, okay, is there a healthy give and take? Is this what we're experiencing in this partnership? Though, what we notice is that ideally, you are seeking a marriage partner who is both intelligent and good looking. So yes, there is a part of this where you're all about aesthetic, appearance, beauty, attractiveness, but they also have to be smart. Thank you so much, Juno and Libra folks. And now we're going to explore Juno in Scorpio. Okay, Juno in Scorpio, let's talk about you. When forming meaningful relationships, so when we think about devotion, commitment, you need emotional depth. You need an intimate bond, an intimate connection. You need to feel these things. You do not take it lightly, for example, if or when your spouse or your partner or a close friend hides things from you, especially intentionally. And you also desire sexual intensity. Yes, sexual intensity. To feel like you do connect physically, emotionally, intimately, and attempting to maybe try to control how the relationship is going, how the marriage is going. That is a possibility, right? And then this could also be where, yes, on one hand, there's a lot of passion. And then also there could be levels of great resilience and determination, but there can also be levels of power. And this, I think, is important to keep in mind because Juno in the chart can show up as any power imbalances. So to have Juno in Scorpio, it's almost like Juno in Scorpio wants to dig deep into those power imbalances, those power dynamics that are maybe underneath the surface, and to perhaps bring them up to the surface so that they can be addressed and looked at for review. And so, hey, in this regard, through that analysis, maybe you go through these renewals, these death and rebirths. It's almost like committed relationships, they're alchemical for you. There's a grand refinement to them. So even though you might, for example, enter into certain committed bonds where, well, perhaps it's very intense and it's a lot, it's full on, this can also equally manifest as you learning so much from those experiences. And then you bring that knowledge and that wisdom into the next relationship. But I do see this as you taking commitment quite seriously in many respects. Yes. And then when it comes to forming committed relationships, you might, well, you might go all in. There could be an all or nothing influence here. And there could be the extremes here tied to Scorpio. But just as much, like I'm trying to get at, there can be the pulling away. There can be this hot and cold dynamic with Scorpio. However, like I'm trying to get at, I can't help but think that it's through life experience, it's through even emotional challenges and thinking about how loss is a part of life and how grief is a part of life. It's almost like you really can even bond with your significant other because you think to yourself, we've gone through so much together. There's this attitude of, I'm never letting you go. I'm never giving up on us. And hey, that can be for better or for worse when we consider this. And let me also just say this, if anybody tries to interfere with your marriage, okay, let me say this is not the type of marriage I would want to be messing with. Because it's going to come with a lot of repercussions. Okay? It's going to come with settling the score possibly, or you just being this person who stands your ground and you refuse to let anybody try to dictate to you or what your relationship is, etc. Oh yeah. And if you're betrayed, if there is even infidelity that comes into the relationship, into the marriage, hey, even if there's a betrayal within a close friendship, you just might retaliate by being furious, could be possibly vengeful, but this could also manifest as you keeping things very reserved. But then within yourself, you're feeling a lot of emotion, and then you're also plotting. Okay, you're being very stealthy, you're plotting, and you know that person is going to get what's coming to them, even if you're involved in it or not. And you might refuse to have sex or offer any of your resources. That's it, cut off. Any resources you once gave, cut off. I can imagine the divorce process here, if anybody ever gets on the wrong side of you. And if things are not reciprocal, you can be very destructive. Okay? You might be unwilling to compromise, especially if something feels off. However, and we want to mention this, you can be so incredibly devoted as a partner. You can be so incredibly compassionate, empathetic, really tuned in with the emotions of your partner, just knowing them on a deeper level. And that is even quite a sacred thing, or that is something that is so valuable. And your partner, your friends feel that connection. And I'm also thinking that it could have been through your parents, through relationships growing up, that what was mirrored back at you was that of, hey, it could have been intensity, it could have been the whole extreme stuff. And also possibly themes of secrecy, having to figure out the truth, things being hidden. Okay. And then maybe this is where your radar is like, no one is gonna pull the wool over my eyes. No one is gonna betray me. Okay. I see all. This is also where, of course, aspects to Juno do matter. So you want to explore Juno and what aspects are being made to Juno, because I equally do see this as that intimate bond, right? It's that depth, it's honesty. I mean, come on, this is Scorpio, this is Juno of unwavering loyalty. And so this could be where there is this attitude of we are close, we are not going to give up on each other easily. Whatever you're going through, I'm going to help you through this. And then also, ideally, you are seeking a marriage partner who is essential, yet also aware of their dark side. Yep, aware of their dark side, quite emotionally intelligent. Thank you so much, Juno and Scorpio folks. Now we're going to explore Juno in Sagittarius. Okay, Juno and Sagittarius folks, let's talk about you. When forming meaningful relationships, meaningful bonds, when we think about commitment and devotion, you need freedom and exploration. My goodness, you need a lot of space. You need to be able to roam. You cannot feel like you're being tied down. You also need to engage in intellectual discussions, right? I'm talking about discussions to do with philosophy, questions to do with why we're here, what is the concept of life or God, okay? Does God exist? All these kinds of questions. But then also sharing similar beliefs and morals might be important to you. So knowing that you and your spouse, you and your partner, you do share the same kind of belief system. You're aligned morally when it comes to your code of ethics. So if, for example, you don't align, that could be where you really step back and you start to reevaluate the relationship. But see, this is not just about marriage. This can also be related to friendships too. Plus, visualizing a future is essential. Maybe you're constantly adapting or you're constantly wanting to expand or grow. So if you ever feel like your partner is not growing with you, that could be a major point of, I am not sure about this. And then also, you prefer optimism and the ability, that's what I'm trying to say, and the ability to grow. Yeah, if there is that stagnation or you just feel like you're not aligned, you don't really have anything in common, especially belief wise, mission wise, aspiration wise, then there could be a part of you that just kind of logically goes, I don't see the point. What is the meaning of this? And when it comes to committing itself, okay, I think that there is a part of you that can jump into a committed relationship pretty quickly, but there's also going to be themes here to do with passion or goals or aspirations or questioning the very future of the relationship itself. So really questioning, where are we headed? Maybe you're the type of person who is willing to ask those questions, right? So I imagine you, for instance, being on a date with someone, and then when with that commitment piece, you kind of think, where are you headed in this life? What are your aspirations? What are your goals? How can we fit into each other's lives in this way? Because maybe you think that you don't want to take away from that person, but you also don't want that person to take away from you. So, yeah, we're really touching on this freedom piece. But hey, whenever you do commit, I do see this as you wanting to travel a great deal with your partner. I see this as you having your own aspirations, respecting your partner's aspirations. And equally, yes, this could be more faith based with the religious aspect of Sagittarius. It could be more faith based where it is about, right, our morals are aligned, our religion is aligned. So let's get married, let's commit, right? There could be that process too. Uh, and if anybody does try to interfere with your relationship, there could be this whole notion of could be rising above, right? You rise above, you take the higher ground, right? You take the moral high ground with Sagittarius, or it could be a case of them seeing your wild side, seeing your untamed side, and you jumping in and being quite fiery and passionate and argumentative. Yeah, there is that side to you too. You might even intellectually outsmart the other person, whoever is trying to get involved. But anyway, also, let's think about if you're betrayed, you just might retaliate honestly. This is so much about honesty and truth. But the thing about it too is you're not going to hold grudges. You're not going to hold grudges. And if things also are not reciprocal, you're going to be pretty open about that. I see this as you being quite frank, quite blunt, just straightforward with whoever it is, right? So if there's a lack of commitment or there's a betrayal, whatever, you just face that person head on and say, this happened, right? What are we going to do about that? This is what I think. Maybe we should break up. Maybe we should get a divorce. And then you sort of go about your day, you know? Maybe for you, it's not as emotionally taxing when we think about a divorce or separation, for instance. Could be nuance to that naturally, right? It's not to say that you don't feel anything, you're not sad about it or anything like that. Plus, you might be willing to argue your point. You might not want to compromise. I guess this is the thing with this placement. You might not want to compromise because you're all about your personal freedom. That could be where challenges could arise when we consider this commitment piece. Yes, but if you do see the higher meaning in it, if you see the higher meaning in it, you will. That's what I think. And I'm also going to consider here that when it came to what was mirrored back at you through your parents or through other relationships growing up, maybe there was a religious spin. Okay, maybe it was about, okay, religion is saying this, and this is what must be done within relationships, within partnerships. But then equally, we want to think about aspects, and maybe there are some of you who could have grown up with that religious reflection, but you still thought, yeah, that's not really for me. It's not aligned with my path, though. Or maybe what was reflected back at you was that partnerships and relationships can be quite reckless, right? Again, this does depend on aspects to Juno, but essentially what I'm going to finish off by saying is that you can be an uplifting partner, very encouraging, seeing the best in your partners. And ideally, you do seek a marriage partner who is principled, but who is also adventurous. Thank you so much, Juno in Sagittarius, folks. And now we are going to explore Juno in Capricorn. Okay, so Juno in Capricorn, when it comes to forming meaningful relationships for you, right, where there is loyalty, there's commitment, there's devotion, you need maturity. Okay, you need your spouse, your partner to be mature, to be responsible, to know what their commitments are. Maybe it's important for you to assess, does my spouse know what the commitment is with relation to marriage, for instance? And you need to know that the other person is in it for the long term. okay? The long term. And yes, this could be marriage, but this could also be more of a long-term committed relationship. I get that not everybody wants to get married. It's really important to look to your personal Juno placement, see what's going on. But you see, commitment matters a great deal to you. So when people follow through with their commitments, when people follow through with what they say they're going to do, and you might really clearly outline what the commitment means to you very early on. And then attempting to parent your partner is likely here, is likely. And honestly, that could get to a point where it feels a bit stagnant or stiff, where you might think to yourself, why on earth am I parenting my spouse, my partner? This can be a similar thing with those who have Juno and Cancer to an extent. But with you, it almost feels like a big responsibility, a big weight, a big burden that you're carrying within the marriage. And then this could also be where you get to a point where you think, what is all of this for? Why am I doing this? I guess this is where aspects do matter to Juno. But essentially, I do think that you prefer respect. You prefer respect and integrity. Even when it comes to commitment itself, I think you can be somewhat cautious. I think that you prefer to take your time. Maybe for you, what's really significant is laying a solid foundation that's based on respect first, but then even throughout your process or throughout your journey with your spouse or with your significant other, if you find that anything maybe jeopardizes that very foundation, that is when you still come to this point of, we're not aligning here. Yeah, maybe for you, it always comes back to that foundation. And then also, if anybody tries to interfere within your marriage, within your committed relationship, within a close friendship even, that's when you can have strong boundaries. Strong boundaries to say no, right? I will not tolerate that. I will not put up with that. That's a lack of respect. Hold on, let's create space here. Not doing that. Yeah. You certainly can know what your boundaries and even what your limits are, what your non-negotiables are, possibly within your marriage, within your relationships, and also when it comes to other people who try to interfere with those things, with those relationships. And if betrayed, right, if there's betrayal or even infidelity, you will most likely retaliate by being cold, distant, possibly snarky, sarcastic. You can be rigid, immovable. You might take a while even to compromise. It might take you a while to compromise, and when you do, it's with good reason. Good reason. There's a purpose behind your compromise. And yeah, if things are not reciprocal, you can be, hey, it could possibly be that you're quite degrading, right? You might know exactly where to get that person where it hurts or what to say to maybe take, to make them feel a bit less than. Yeah. You just do not tolerate disrespect. You don't. And also, when we think about what was mirrored back at you through partnerships and relationships growing up, when we think about the marriage between your parents or the relationship between your parents, for example, other relationships, maybe what you learned is that one, relationships are very hard and tiresome and they're full of responsibility and there's always something that, it's a lot of pressure, it's tough. Or it could have been mirrored back at you that this is about really being in it for the long haul and it's about success and we want to dedicate our lives to each other and devote our lives to each other. It does depend, I think, on aspects. It depends on your personal relationship with Juno and how she shows up in your chart. But overall, what I will say here, Juno and Capricorn, you can be such disciplined partners, right? A really disciplined partner. Ideally, you're seeking a marriage partner who is structured and who has some form of integrity. They're quite responsible. They have their SH1T together. Okay, and they're not looking for you to parent them. Thank you so much, Juno in Capricorn, folks. Now we're going to talk about Juno in Aquarius. All right, Juno in Aquarius, folks, let's talk about you. When forming meaningful relationships, so when we think about commitment, devotion, unwavering loyalty, you need friendship present. You need to also feel like you're an individual and you have plenty of space, plenty of freedom. And with the friendship piece, it's almost like your spouse, your partner, your significant other, you want them to feel like your friend or to literally be a friend to you as well. This is not just about love. This is not just about more of that sexual connection. It's also about that platonic connection. You might even enjoy doing things on your own away from the relationship. So you might need that space, that time to maybe do your normal coffee shop run or to go to your favorite event every week, whatever that is for you. And at the same time, you value being friendly, you value being kind and sort of weird with your partner. Yeah, a little bit weird. I'm smiling because I know of people who have Juno and Aquarius in my life, and I see how they get on with their spouse, with their partner. Yeah, there is like a secret language that you and your partner speak, and that might be something that you really value and you love. Plus, you do prefer courtesy and the element of surprise. Okay, so your partner keeping you on your toes, you might equally sort of keep your partner on their toes, right? There can be the unpredictability with Aquarius, but then there's also the stability and that kind of security that you're seeking at the same time. It's trying to find a balance of the two and mix of the two. And then I'm thinking when it comes to commitment itself, this could be where you might prefer to start off as friends first, and then that can be when the commitment organically occurs. Or it could be that out of nowhere, you commit to someone completely new. It's almost like just by surprise, you're in a committed relationship. And then that within itself is quite exciting for you. Or it could be where you are more intellectual about commitment, right? You're going to be more logical, a bit more detached about it, and you're going to think about it more, right? Analyze it a bit more, be in your head about it. Okay, at the same time, if others try to interfere with your relationship, so this close bond you have with another person, even, this could be about friendships and things, but if others try to interfere, this can be when, for example, you really use your words to be very clear. Like, no. Okay, it's communicating what your boundaries are. Or it could be a case of you distancing yourself from whoever it is, just not even giving them, you don't give them any of your time, any of your emotion, right? It's like, why would I even why would I even think about you? You're not even in my mind. Why are you trying to cause drama or cause an argument? Bye. Bye. Detach. Healthy detachment here with Aquarius. Still, if betrayal comes into the equation here, if any kind of infidelity comes into the equation, you will most likely retaliate by being distant, by being detached. Or, hey, this could also be where you do use your words to be very clear. I mean, there is a side to Aquarius that can be quite cutthroat. Like, yeah, yeah, this air sign that's still able to communicate from a place of truth and honesty. And if things aren't reciprocal, you can be rebellious, or you might step into the debate. Step into this debate where you argue your point across until you are blue in the face, possibly. If you think an idea is good, you just might compromise, but you can also be stubborn. But then I'm also thinking this is when if your partner can come onto your side and make you see things from their point of view and have the facts, have the valid reasons, then you might tempt with that kind of view of you may be tempted by that view of, okay, maybe we can try that. Maybe we can try that. Could be some healthy tact and wit. Though I am going to also mention that you can be a rather startling partner. Startling. And in this regard, you can pretty much keep your partners, your friends, your people who are close to you on their toes. And what might have been actually mirrored back at you through partnerships and relationships growing up, hey, you know what? It could have been this unwavering commitment of, really showcasing a devotion that's bigger than yourself. I think that's the thing about Aquarius, right? Aquarius can still be a highly committed, loyal sign, right? Yeah. And so the thing about it is it's about being kind and being courteous and thoughtful towards others. And so you might have this thing about you where you're like this because you saw that reflect back at you through your parents' relationship or other relationships. Then again, what could have also been reflected back at you was that of rebellion and needing to break away, needing space. Because, when it is too emotionally charged or taxing, the Aquarius brain just goes, I cannot deal with this. Like, I can't physically deal with this. This is where your personal chart comes into it, right? You have to think about where Juno is, what aspects are being made to Juno. But what I will say is that ideally, you are seeking a marriage partner who is dependable, yet experimental. Thank you so much, Juno in Aquarius, folks. And lastly, we are going to talk about Juno in Pisces. Okay, Juno in Pisces, that this is a placement that I have. Yes, Juno is in Pisces in the 7th house in my chart. Okay. When forming meaningful relationships, so when we think about devotion, commitment, possessing this loyalty, you need sensitivity, you need compassion. So to feel that there is this emotional intelligence, this emotional awareness coming from your spouse, your partner, your friends, but then you also seek complete faith and devotion, and to feel intertwined emotionally and spiritually. So maybe for you, there is a great deal of compassion from you towards your spouse, towards your significant other. You're very good at putting yourself into other people's shoes, but not intellectually like a Libra does. This is more emotionally. And then also, it is about a higher purpose. There's a higher meaning here. There's something quite spiritual, which I'm trying to get at. And I'm also thinking that you can be a bit of a hopeless romantic. You can sort of live in this little fantasy world, dream of situations within your relationships. And you also might prefer this type of boundless love, this deep understanding. However, and this, I gotta say this, it's a big however. What can often happen though is you might lose yourself within the relationship itself. And so this is where it would behoove you to be mindful of how much you do merge or how much you do intertwine. Maybe this is where healthy levels of separation need to come into the equation. And then also I'm thinking when it comes to commitment itself, you might wear those, the whole rose-colored glasses to do with Pisces. You might wear rose-colored glasses and see things in your partner that you think are more admirable, beautiful, but then you might overlook flaws. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just about trying to bring in some healthy realism, healthy balance into this, seeing that no one is all good or all bad. And then also it's about you having some kind of awareness about, okay, how much might you be merging too heavily within that relationship? And I can identify with this quite strongly. And I have been working on this over the years. Thank you, Saturn. Saturn has been traveling through Pisces over the past number of years. So really interesting to consider. But what I will say is, the love that you have to give, oh my goodness, there's so much, right? You can be so gentle, so soft, right? There is a gentleness to you. There is a longing to want to see your spouse, your partner, whoever you're with, happy and feeling good, feeling at peace, feeling calm within themselves. And then also, if anybody tries to interfere with your relationship, if they try to come in, that could be when it feels a bit overwhelming. Now, don't get me wrong, there might be parts of this where you're just not willing to see the truth in the relationship based on what's being said to you. But equally, this could be about you coming to terms with, actually, hold on, I'm not going to be swayed. I'm not going to be swayed just because other people might be projecting their own stuff onto my relationship, that kind of stuff. So then you have to sort of separate even too, right? There's that healthy separation is what I'm trying to get at here. But if betrayed, if there is any kind of infidelity, you will most likely retaliate. You could withdraw. You might behave as a victim. You might even martyr yourself. You can also be quite idealistic. So your idealistic and dreamy expectations can hurt you. So it's sort of as if to say, oh, well, it was just the one time, it's fine. You're amazing anyway. You hurt me, so it's okay. I'll forgive you. Yeah. So we want to be mindful of this. We do want to be mindful of this with Juno and Pisces. And if things are not reciprocal, you can also experience this self-pity. You might even compromise without considering your own needs. Yeah, let's just put it this way. There's a lot of karmic lessons here, spiritual lessons here to do with like healthy bonds where there is a healthy give and take, where there is this ability for you to, for example, say, no, I need this. I want this. This is my desire. It's okay to be selfish. It's okay to have an ego within your relationships too, within a marriage. But there's still that beauty of connection and closeness. And then I'm thinking that what was maybe mirrored back at you through relationships such as your parents' marriage or relationship or other relationships was that of surrender and sacrifice. It's interesting to consider because Juno, we've talked about Juno in the myth and how Juno can show up as many sacrifices we make. So when in Pisces, this could be where, yeah, these sacrifices are amplified. Juno and Pisces can be where there's so much sacrifice, and that could be what was reflected back at you. This is not necessarily a bad thing, right? I don't want you to think that, making sacrifices is always a bad thing. I think it's still about, okay, you recognizing the part of you that is willing to make a sacrifice and how that is really admirable, but equally seeing that it shouldn't be you always sacrificing, right? It shouldn't always fall on you to make the excuses, to go the extra mile, to put up with other people's projections or their crappy behavior onto you. You know, there's such a sensitivity here, such a sensitivity, and you gotta honor that, honor your sensitivity, and not allow for people who are maybe trying to, um, they're maybe trying to overpower you or take advantage of you. This does depend on aspects, so you want to explore aspects in the chart, of course, always. So remember that. But what I will say is that ideally, you're seeking a marriage partner who is creative and intuitive. So when we think about a marriage partner, yeah, aligning with someone who loves your sensitivity, who also is able to see that you have your own stuff, you have your own priorities, and they're not expecting you to do all of the heavy emotional lifting and having to cater. You know, it's not you always having to cater to their emotions, right? Because, you know, I'm just going to say this, maybe it is that you've been in relationships, partnerships where you've committed, and then it's them that have wanted you to always merge with them. And anytime that you tried to separate, they would manipulate you and try to bring you back into that merging process. So it's finding someone who doesn't do that with you, essentially, is what I'm trying to get at here, Juno and Pisces. Anyway, everyone, this has been the video all about the Juno signs. I took a little bit extra time there exploring Juno and Pisces just because I have that placement. But I do want to say thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you would like to book a reading with me, you can, of course, visit my website, hannahselsewhere.com. If you would allow me to guide you. And also, if you did benefit from this video today, you can always buy me a coffee. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and give the video a like if you did like it today. And I will catch you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.